Hello and welcome to another edition of Turks and Caicos Crossroads. It's been a bit of a break, but we are back, and today I'd like to welcome Larry Lamard Garland to our studio, aspiring entrepreneur who is going to tell us about some of the ventures he's interested in, some of the research he's done, and we're very happy to welcome here Larry in our studio. Welcome, Larry.
Thank you.
We've had quite a few Garlands on the show. Any relations to you? We've had here Sandra Garland and her daughter. Is that, I guess, somewhere there's a relationship, right?
Yes, there is a cousin relationship between us there.
Okay.
Yes.
I think to begin with, Larry, before we get on to the venture that you're currently interested in, we're also going to chat about your work in tourism and in the as an air traffic controller. I'd like to perhaps start off with a brief biographical sketch. That is, tell our viewers a little bit about yourself, childhood, where you grew up, the school you went to, etc.
Certainly. I was born in Grand Turk, the capital of the islands, raised in South Caicos, and I migrated over here to Providenciales in 1989. However, throughout my experiences in South Caicos, I basically had started my career, manhood that is, in terms of working with an airline charter company.
Are alive with the sound of music.
Work experience around the aviation aspects of engineering, also office administration, after which I became employed by the Turks and Caicos Islands government Civil Aviation Department as an air traffic controller assistant. However, as an assistant, I did work independently as well as under supervision by other air traffic controllers. When you identify that in perspective, everything led on to other areas in terms of recognizing that job itself being a job that was quite challenging, which I might say I still look at as being challenging.
The air traffic control.
Yes. However, when you identify in terms of other areas, as you had just mentioned, being an aspiring entrepreneur, it was my desire from at that stage in time to focus on an area whereby I can become not specifically dependent on any other person or any other entity as such, but more self-dependency in terms of being able to take things on my own.
Let me go back a step for 1 second.
Sure.
You said you were born in South Caicos and you grew up in Grand Turk, right?
Actually born in Grand Turk.
Sorry.
Yes.
Born in Grand Turk, grew up in South Caicos.
Yes.
At that time, the tourism, of course, was far less developed in the Turks and Caicos Islands. And when you were growing up, later on started your first work with the Civil Aviation Department, did you already have some kind of a notion that Providenciales was going to be the island taking off and that eventually you probably would have to move there?
While employed as an air traffic controller, I recognize that when you identify in terms of areas of growth, Providenciales at that time had a bank whereby it was open open 5 days a week, as well as with Grand Turk, right? This was Barclays Bank. Through this factor, recognizing a bank of that nature, I think any entity or any community that has as such institution that provides various different services, you will recognize that there is a thought prospect that something will take place, right? Because I think when you identify the areas that was in growth at the time, me being a studious person, right, working at advanced level accounting at the time, sure review, I realized that the idea in terms of me being able to function within another area in terms of being able to utilize my newly refound knowledge was merely aimed at going someplace where there was entities as such that can enhance my intellect.
So from air traffic control, you went on to accountancy.
Somewhat.
Yeah.
While coming over here, I was in areas of management in terms of working as a lab assistant at the Caicos farm. And thereafter, I moved on to a small firm, which is called Business Accounting Services, where I did a short internship there, after which I moved into management training with Ramada International.
With Ramada.
Yes.
Yeah. We'll move on to accountancy and tourism in a very short while. For those who are not as experienced in air traffic control, I'd like to perhaps just touch on that for one more minute. Needless to say, here in the Turks and Caicos, we don't have the sort of traffic that you get in Miami or in New York or places like that. But still, you're in a relatively small space. You're responsible for making sure that planes land and take off in a safe manner. Was that stressful at times?
Well, to be honest with you, right, I think in any job area there's stress, right? However, the important thing that I've noted about stress is that what my instructors normally told me that stress is good for you, right? Why? It keeps you thinking. It keeps you mentally alert. And by being mentally alert, you can focus in terms of being able to relate to many different situations at a given time. What I am saying is that you'll be able to function on many different areas simultaneously.
Ever a situation while you were working in air traffic control where things got a little iffy, where you thought, oh gosh, this is, you know...
Well, I think recalling from my experiential background in ATC, right, I think we should know that an air traffic controller is responsible for the safety, orderly, expeditious, and efficient flow of air traffic control, right? But when you identify basically your question and thought, I recall just before vacating air traffic control that there was a near miss just over the Grand Turk TCA, which was in the Miami Terminal Management Area, the FIR. And what happened is that there was a power failure in Grand Turk. Grand Turk is where the approach sector was located. When I say approach sector, they control the airspace within the confines of the Turks and Caicos Islands, right? Which is basically surface to 6,000 feet AMSL, which is above mean sea level, which when you identify that just based on barometric pressure readings.
Right.
However, I think what had happened when the power failed, the voice link, which is the hotline connected to Miami Air Traffic Control Center, it had failed as well in Grand Turk. So this was all due to the fact of the power failure, which caused communication, relay systems, and everything to be suspended for a period of time. Due to this factor, while in South Caicos, it was evident by myself while working at tower, realizing the situation has occurred, the emergency that took place. I had advised Miami of the power failure, and I was interested in knowing if I could have assisted in any way. So the radar controller explained to me that he had two aircraft opposite direction at 31,000 feet, which was losing separation. Now, when you identify two aircraft, say opposite direction, the manner of impact, it's based on the combination of two speeds. Because when you take consideration 727 at 31,000 feet, probably doing about 440 to 460 knots, right? At Airbus 300 opposite direction. It's basically you find that both of them may be doing the same speed. So the rate of closure, right, may come to a fact, well, it may be much more in terms of speed factor versus it just coming from another direction, right? When this happened, after the air controller confirmed with me that he had these aircraft on radar and he needed clearance to be passed, right? Immediately, I passed the clearance. On passing the clearance, I called the air traffic controller back, and he said he had the aircraft descending to flight level 290 at the time, which was based on his clearance, right? Mm-hmm. That descent was a clear picture in mind that, it was a point where a lot of people were saved, right? Now, I take that thought that, as an air traffic controller, it's your responsibility to provide a safe and orderly, as I was saying, expeditious and efficient flow of air traffic services, right?
When you say near miss, you said that earlier on.
Yes.
What sort of distance to the layperson were we talking about with these two aircraft?
Okay, their separation was probably, say, within about 17 to 20 minutes prior to impact.
Okay.
Yes.
So they had, luckily someone came in, they had sufficient time to correct the situation.
Yes, actually, when you identify it, right,
Mm.
looking in terms of separation minimums, they had not quite reached the separation minimum at the time, right? However, you should always anticipate where you have a buffer,
Yeah.
right? The buffer identifies that if there is a situation of that nature comes about, you would have adequate preparation so that before they reach the minimum requirement, they would somewhat be cautioned, not just cautioned, but they would be taken the thought of where the separation is achieved prior to such time that the levels are crossed.
I would imagine, and again, I'm not an expert on the subject, but there must be quite a bit of traffic over the Turks and Caicos, irrespective of what comes to us directly, but also just flying above us to, I don't know, Puerto Rico, Eastern Caribbean. Is that correct?
Directly, right? Why is that? Is because we have a VOR. A VOR is basically a VHF, omnidirectional range. What this here simply, to break it down, right? When you identify, give an example, a bicycle wheel, right? A bicycle wheel has so many spokes. And you can identify the VOR as a bicycle wheel emitting imaginary signals, which there are 360 signals, right, being emitted from this VOR. On this VOR, these signals are in the form of radials. Mm-hmm. A radial could be off the Grand Turk VOR as the Alpha 555, right, which is somewhere like the 305 degree radial, right, 306 degree radial, right. And when you identify it, if you're taking off from Grand Turk, right, you may have taking off from Provo in any instance, you may have a clearance to Miami. The clearance itself may be Grand Turk ATC clears American 658 Heavy to Miami Airport via Provo direct Micas Alpha 555 as far.
You can lose our audience, but anyway, so go ahead.
Okay, but what I'm saying is that, it basically gives a respective feeling that, it's not all that technical, right? There's a lot of technical jargon, right? However, when you identify in terms of the overall prospect of it all is that, you're responsible.
Mm. You're watching Turks and Caicos Crossroads, a Channel 4 production. My name is Titus de Boer, today in conversation with Mr. Larry Lamard Garland. Larry, probably because it's a fascinating subject, we just got carried away a little bit with air traffic control, and I hope you forgive me for that.
Sorry.
Let's move on now to business-related matters. You mentioned earlier on that sort of as you were in air traffic control, you also became increasingly interested in accountancy. You did internships in accountancy companies. And gradually the idea developed to one day go into business for yourself. Let's focus on that for a moment. How and when exactly did this idea come up?
Well, that's a good question. I've always focused in terms of being independent, right? In terms of someday wanting to own my business. What I had done was basically prepared myself in terms of the academics and the training aspect of it, developing experience, in terms that